It's worked so far, but we're not out yet.
I wanna know what you're thinking. There are some things you can't hide. I wanna know what you're feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
Pure energy.
Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Enterprising Individuals, the Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, a.k.a. Caliban, and yeah, Cardassian neck trick is okay. I like their original lineup, but Ferengi earwaggle is way better. You probably haven't heard of them. I'm joined on this episode by heelmary and Gooey Fame. They have a podcast called Existence is Futile, where they're on a journey to watch and discuss every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. heelmary and Gooey Fame, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
Good to have you here. Permission to come aboard granted. Today we'll be talking about Necessary Evil, the 8th episode of the 2nd season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. As a military and exploratory organization, Starfleet serves as the gateway to many of the stories in the Star Trek universe, and we, the viewers, see strange new worlds and new civilizations through the nominally earthen eyes of the Federation. But storytelling in the Trek franchise isn't just limited to I, sirs, and make it so's, and scan for life forms. And programs like DS9 took pains to show a world that existed before we discovered it, and one that had problems of its own. But we'll talk about that a little later in the show. First of all, I always ask new guests on the show about their backstory and how they became Star Trek fans. Mary, how about you?
So full disclosure, this is my first Deep Space Nine episode.
Really?
I've
Okay,
only
right.
seen The Next Generation. I grew up watching it, but by that time it was already in syndication, so just completely out of order. And then I've seen all the movies, and that's been my experience other than rewatching it for the podcast now.
Okay, well, I definitely want to get your impressions as a first-time DS9 viewer, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Gooey, how did you become a Star Trek fan?
Kind of similar as a kid. Like, family watched it. My dad really liked it, and I just kind of... I at that time, I would watch it, but I wasn't a big fan. And then I think the 2009 movie came out, went and saw that, liked it, and then what really did it, and I think a lot of people that we know are like this, all the shows came on Netflix back in the day, and it was like, all right, I can revisit this thing that I have like a faint memory of. So I watched all the series on Netflix and became a big fan. Like this, I guess this is only like 6 years ago or something, whenever that happened. So
Sure. It's not everybody just binging Friends. Some people are actually discovering Star Trek. Well, in addition to Existence is Futile, Gooey, you're also one half of the podcasting team behind the Pro Wrestling Required Viewing podcast.
Yes.
What's the story behind that?
That was just back in the day when I started it, like 2 years ago. Just wanted to have a podcast where I could talk to my friends about wrestling, I guess. And like Star Trek podcasts, there's like 1,000 of them. So I was like, sure, I might as well do one too. But yeah, it's just me and my pal Vic watch anything wrestling related and talk about it. But we end up just talking about almost anything else. So
Sure.
Even if Gooey didn't have a wrestling podcast, they would mostly be talking about wrestling.
That's true.
Might as well set a mic up, right?
Yeah.
So you watch, at times you watch a piece of media, like a movie or a TV show or something that is wrestling related.
Yeah, it could be anything. So, like, a lot of times it'll be like a match or an event, but we also watched like the Moana because The Rock was in it. It's like, why not?
Yeah.
We actually did one where instead of Vic and I hosting, Mary came on and we watched the episode of Voyager with The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Sunkatse.
Yeah. So if you want to, that's one of the series I've watched it, but I'm least familiar with, and that was another one. Mary had never seen it. So if you want to hear two people who know nothing about Voyager talk about Voyager, go check it out.
Well, I heard the episode, and I think you guys peg it in the episode that, like, that's not as far as like being the first episode of Voyager that you see. That is not like what Voyager usually is. It's such a weird episode.
It seemed like it, and it's like, yeah, it's not one that's like, because it's later in the season, so
yeah,
you can't just like be like this one, the Deep Space Nine episode we watched. You can sort of piece together what's going on if you've never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sort of.
But you guys did a good job, I think, pegging all the kind of wrestling tropes or just sort of aspects that they had in there. I know that, in my opinion, the heel promoter was definitely a Bischoff. I was screaming that at
sure, yeah.
when I was listening to the show. But they did miss a couple things, like, and you pointed this out too, like, where were the promos? Like, you needed promos if it was really going to be a wrestling thing. And who was Alien Mean Gene?
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Mean Gene.
Yeah,
R.I.P.
yeah. R.I.P.
I think the biggest disappointment was just that maybe it's because it was the beginning of his acting career, but it was like, where was The Rock was barely in it. That's what I wanted to watch it for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was basically just UPN saying, "Hey, we got a wrestling show," but it also might have been. I'm pretty sure that the wrestling show had better ratings than Star Trek, so it might have been also a, "Hey, wrestling fans, check out Star Trek." But it's not going to be like this every week.
Yeah.
Right, like literally never again.
Never
now,
again.
Now
will
that
it be
we've
like
got
this.
you,
I think we
Here's
talked
a
about that
completely
too.
different
Like,
show.
who is this for? Like, who is this crossover for? I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's the general perception of it as well. Most Star Trek fans are like, what is this for? And most wrestling fans don't really even know about it.
We're the weird cross section that happens to like both.
it's for us.
Have you done the Tooth Fairy yet?
The Tooth Fairy, no, that's
No.
I love I love like any movie with The Rock in it. So
Yeah.
even the worst one, and I don't think I've heard good things about that, but I would be excited to watch it. So.
Well, I'll be listening for that. If I'm not mistaken, you guys are both musicians and you're both in bands as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about your music?
Yeah, so I actually play with Paul, who does our podcast music. We're in a band together called Bringers. And, man, I never know how to describe it. It's kind of like droney, sad pop, I guess.
Okay. All right.
It's creepy stuff.
Yeah. Gooey came to a show once and got scared during our set, which felt like a great accomplishment.
And you have some really interesting instrumentation in the band, too. Did I see you playing melodica?
I no longer play the melodica. So that was actually another project that Paul and I had done. It was more of like a folk punk, but we were just talking about bringing the melodica back into Bringers.
But
Sure.
like dark melodic.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
Okay.
like, yeah.
The previous project actually does the theme for Pro Wrestling Required Viewing too, so there's a lot of
that's true.
crossover going on here.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, now we do. It's like keyboard, synth. We've got like a looping pedal, some samples, a lot of electronic stuff going on.
Fog machine.
Yes, newly added fog machine.
Well, you gotta have that.
Of course.
Your last show I saw, there was also like some the venue had like some branches or like vines hanging down, and there was a fog machine, and it looked like a set of a Star Trek episode.
Oh, okay, nice.
And because Paul does the theme to our show, I was just like, yeah, I feel like I'm in our podcast right now.
That's like a vibe we're going for.
I love it. Yeah.
We needed some boulders.
The boulders
Right,
are so crucial.
yeah, right. Some fake-looking boulders, yeah, and an orange backdrop for the sky.
That's awesome.
Gooey, what about you?
I play bass in a lot of. I've played in various like emo pop punk bands, like Midwest emo bands, I guess. So
Sure.
I've been kind of a hired gun in a lot of bands. Like I've come into a lot of bands after they've started and like just become like a member. So I'm
Hired
always
gun.
Yeah, I'm always that like weird fourth member that's like, there's that band, and then and Gooey's there too now.
I have had that experience. That's true.
So
You're the ringer. They bring you in.
I'm the ringer, yeah. So currently I play in this band called Annabelle, which has been a band for a long time. And even before joining, I'm trying to speak objectively, but they're pretty awesome.
Yes.
They're from Ohio. Most of us live in Chicago now. So it makes for some fun commutes. And then I played in some other bands like Empire. I was a Lonely Estate. I played in this band called Dowsing. And then I played in some other bands like Empire. I was a Lonely Estate. I was a Lonely Estate. I played in this band called Dowsing. Yeah, a bunch of bands like that. Bunch of sad little Midwest bands.
Why did you decide to start a podcast where you watch and discuss Star Trek: The Next Generation?
Well, we were at a bringer show, actually, last January, and we were just talking about Star Trek, and I think it was Paul who was like, you guys should do a podcast, because that's what you do now. So
right.
It was really that simple. It was like, I think, weren't you like, I've been meaning to rewatch it or something?
Yeah, I had always wanted to rewatch it just because I've never watched the episodes in order, and so that seemed like a good reason to do it.
And TNG is one I know better, and it was just like, yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. So,
and I had been on Gooey's wrestling podcast a few times, but wasn't watching wrestling so much. So I think it was just like getting back into like podcasting and doing something together. It just seemed like a fun project to work on.
Well, you're pretty early in the series, and good luck to you guys. I mean, you'll get there eventually, but
well, we're going every other week too, so it's going to take like actually 7 years, or
Yeah, some of those early episodes can be kind of rough.
Are
there any insights that you guys have made about the show so far? Besides, oh boy, I hope we get to the good ones soon.
We were in that for a while, but I think now, like, it's been a while since we've been really disappointed.
We're getting to the end of season 1, and it's starting to get better.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think as a general rule, season 3 of any show tends to be like where it gets really good.
Oh yeah, sure.
So we're kind of we're keeping track of like the best episodes for the future, and then maybe we'll just forget about some of the other episodes from season 1. We're learning that some of them are forgettable.
What do you guys think about the news that there's going to be a Jean-Luc Picard series set 20 years after TNG?
I think it's cool. I don't know what you think.
Who's going to be mad at that?
Yeah. I feel like I feel like I trust it to be good. So
yeah, Discovery, the new show, has been pretty good so far. So the team behind that, hopefully, I think they could probably deliver a pretty good show about Picard. And what I want to see in a Picard show is like everything that we've seen, except for the later movies, has been, a prequel or in the past, or just like a side story. So I'd kind of like to see where the future of the future is going, like what the Federation is like after all those things that happened on TNG.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I've always that's actually why I personally really liked Deep Space Nine, because TNG was like a show that I had more of an anchor for before I like binged all these shows on Netflix. And so I loved Deep Space Nine and Voyager too, because it was like, oh, this is like the continuation of like that story.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why'd you guys choose this specific episode, Necessary Evil, to discuss today?
Well, so we had watched The Big Goodbye.
Okay, yeah.
And I took issue with the fact that it's this, like film noir episode, like detective vibes, but they don't actually investigate anything.
There's no mystery, yeah.
Yeah, so I was kind of asking Gooey, like, are there any episodes where they actually do, like, an investigation? And so Gooey thought of this, or did you research it, or?
This one I looked up, but it like when you asked me that question initially, it just made me think of how I feel like Deep Space Nine delivered on some promises of like this episode even more, like both in like having cool holodeck adventures, which TNG does too, but
right.
But I feel like Deep Space Nine really took it some fun places, and then also, like I said, I remembered a lot of episodes of like some serious investigations and stuff like that, because they had a character who was like specifically a cop, so
right.
It was like, yeah, they really went for it with that.
Yeah, we wanted to see some space cops.
Yeah,
Space cops, sure.
Some noir-y stuff. So I was
some hard-boiled space stuff. Yeah.
So I was like trying to, I remembered sort of some episodes, and then I looked up a couple, and I was like, oh yeah, this seems like a good option.
There's often a mystery in like a scientific mystery in Trek episodes, where they're trying to figure out like what a problem is or how to solve it. But yeah, they don't often go into the sort of crime mystery that we get in this episode. And that's the cool thing about Odo as a character. I mean, there's a lot of cool aspects to him, but they definitely, I think, placed him there as every once in a while we could do a mystery. We could do like a crime type show. And he's always trying to chase down bad guys, or he's always trying to bust Quark too.
Yeah, they have like I know later on, I remember they almost have like a buddy cop vibe. Not that Quark's a cop, but where like they have a begrudging friendship almost.
Right.
Yeah, I always love that dynamic.
Yeah, it plays out really well over the series. Well, let's talk about this episode. It's Necessary Evil. Like I said, the 8th episode of the 2nd season of DS9. First aired on November 14th of 1993. It was written by Peter Allen Fields, who we've talked about several times previously on this show. He was a producer on DS9 for its first 2 seasons, and he wrote many episodes of TNG and DS9, like The Inner Light, Duet, and In the Pale Moonlight. It was directed by James L. Conway, another name that we've talked about several times on this show. Conway directed 18 episodes combined of the 4 post-TOS pre-Discovery shows, including Duet, The Way of the Warrior, and the pilot of Enterprise, Broken Bow. The stardate for this episode is 47282.5, and the past sequences are set during the Cardassian Occupation of Bajor, which would be 2365 by the show's reckoning. And your assignment, Mary and Gooey, you can split this up however you want, is to give us a 25-word synopsis of Necessary Evil.
Oh my gosh. We'll do one word no.
Yeah, alternate.
Let's see.
It was a dark and stormy night. You have to do it like a hard-boiled detective novel.
There was a lot of like kind of cheesy Odo narration.
Yeah.
One that really sticks out to me is like, is this appropriate for a Starfleet log? I don't care. Okay,
so he was setting the mood along with Vatrik Palra.
Yes.
Right.
So she enters and she's like sending Quark on a mission.
Right.
To retrieve this list. Gooey.
List contains Bajoran collaborators, Cardassian collaborators that are Bajoran. I don't know. Odo's trying to figure out if Kira did it or not. Did a murder or
We're
not.
going back and forth in time.
Yeah, it's hard to do this in 25 words.
Which was quite confusing upon first viewing.
Oh, sure. You didn't
I was like, there are many plots and characters, and then I started to put it all together. We're going back and forth in time.
Yeah, I suppose having watched a previous episode would help with that.
I think we're already over 25 words.
Yeah,
we blew it.
Yeah, sorry for the poor description.
Hijinks ensue. Yeah. I always give first-timers the tip, you got to drop articles and modifiers. Just talk like a robot. And
just
there.
Words.
You made a good point that this is a kind of a weird, maybe tough episode for a first viewer, but it also gives you a lot of background because you're actually seeing this whole thing that hangs over DS9, of course, is the occupation of Bajor by the Cardassians. And so you've got this sort of post-World War II, lawless zone like you did in Europe in the late 40s and early 50s, where all these a guy like Quark, can thrive. He can get things done. He can do things, under the or above the law. And so by watching this episode, you get a story in the present, but we also get to look back and see, okay, all right, so this guy, Gul Dukat, he was in charge. And Odo wasn't always the cop. He was put in that position to investigate. So, yeah, I mean, if you can get through it, it tells you a lot about DS9.
Yeah, I think it does a good job of, like, kind of contextualizing the characters. So, like, even Kira, you see she's a little different than before.
Yeah.
You just get a kind of a different take on all the characters that we would know, I guess. For you, I guess that's weird to have that be your first time, but...
Well, here's some interesting facts from the memory banks about this episode. Like Fields and Conway's previous collaboration, the first season episode Duet, which is a great one. You should watch that one too. This episode was a favorite for many cast and crew members. Odo actor René Auberjonois called it one of the best episodes the show had ever done. Kira actress Nana Visitor appreciated the ambiguity that the episode introduced into the Odo-Kira relationship. Writer and producer Ira Stephen Bear complimented Conway on his direction in the episode. Producer and director David Livingston also praised Conway, as well as director of photography Marvin Rush, who provided the dark noirish look of the episode. And one of the things that I really like about it, which is a little on the nose, but I'll take it, is that it opens literally like in the dark with candles. And then as we get to the station, they're literally like turning all the lights off, as he's doing his narration. So it's like, All right, pay attention, everybody. This is going to be literally a noir episode. Like we're going dark on this one.
Yeah. Like you said, it's a little like cheesy, I guess, but I like that it's like the total like tone setter. Like it works. I think. Yeah, I liked it.
We open on Quark talking to a woman who looks kind of like Lana Turner, and she's like all slinky in a dress and that sort of thing, and it's kind of. I know for me, watching it for the first time in the second season, it was like, what are we doing? What is this? It's a little bit of a departure, but it's fun. Series co-creator Michael Piller also praised the episode and the performance of Catherine Moffat as Palra, but he regretted producer Rick Berman's decision to cut a scene that would have established that Gul Dukat was actually having an affair with Palra in the present timeline. And I think they did that to sort of, to set it up as like an extra red herring. So Odo would sort of find out about this and be like, oh, maybe Dukat's the guy behind the whole thing. And Dukat actor Mark Alaimo also wanted that scene to stay in. And as you mentioned before about the log, this is the only episode of the series in which we hear Odo keeping a log, which of course he professes a disdain for. Though, of course, for the purpose of the episode, as Mary pointed out, it provides the hard-boiled narration that's customary to this kind of detective fiction. We see a photo of the victim, Cesario Cito, on a pad in this episode. It's actually a photo of special effects designer and producer Dan Curry. Curry began his run as VFX supervisor on the second half of the first season of TNG, and he would hold that role for each of the post-TOS series until the end of Enterprise. And thanks to the flashback storyline in this episode, we get a few firsts for the series. This is the first time that Odo meets Kira and Quark. It's the first time that he speaks to Dukat, although he met him before, or at least they were in the same room before, as Dukat mentions. And it's the first time that Kira meets Quark. It's presumably the first time that Dukat meets Kira, not counting her time travel orb trip in the later episode Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. But in S.D. Perry and Britta Dennison's DS9 novel Dawn of the Eagles, it's actually revealed that Dukat was aware that Kira was the daughter of Kira Maru, his former lover, and he had had Odo's investigation interfered with behind the scenes to prevent Kira from being charged with the murder of Vatrick.
Whoa.
Oh.
There's some deep lore going on.
A little beta canon stuff going on there, yeah.
Okay.
And this is chronologically the first time that Odo is referred to as Constable by Kira in this episode.
I like that title.
I love that title too.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes any sense, but I really do. It's a great title. It really sets him up in that role. Well, let's talk about the guest stars for this episode. Mark Alaimo, of course, appears as Gul Dukat in this episode in the scene set during the Cardassian Occupation. Max Grodenchik appears as Rom, brother of Quark. Catherine Moffat appears as Vatrick Palra. Moffat previously appeared on TNG as Etana Joel in the episode The Game, which is coming up in the future for you guys. Moffat made many TV guest appearances from the late 70s until she retired from acting in 1998, and she was the voice of the Scarlet Witch in the 90s Iron Man animated series.
Oh.
And Robert McKenzie appears as Trazko, Palra's assassin. McKenzie made several TV appearances in the 80s and early 90s, including a role in the miniseries V, L.A. Law, and in Quantum Leap.
Nice.
There has to be. I don't know if you guys are Quantum Leap fans, but there's got to be a Quantum Leap podcast out there somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the titles alone. Like, you could have a really great podcast based on
Yeah. Every episode you have to leap into, the new the new podcast about whatever episode you're talking about.
I've definitely I've heard there used to be this podcast called It's That Episode, and it was partially actually an inspiration for the format of Pro Wrestling Required Viewing, where
really
it was like, have someone on and they pick a random TV episode to watch.
Just any TV episode.
Yeah, and they watch it. One time they actually watched an episode of Monday Night Raw, but I think they had a guy on multiple times, and they watched some weird Quantum Leap episodes. So
okay,
yeah,
is that a show is it still on?
I think it's ended years ago. I think they every once in a while do like one-off episodes, or it's one guy, but it was a really funny episode or show back in the day. So got me into listening to podcasts actually. So highly recommend. Yeah.
Man, that's such a good premise. I want to steal that so bad.
I think it's
you can maybe have it.
Yeah,
it might be available.
Okay, all right. I gotta get my people to check up on that. I'd pick something like the McNeil era News Hour or something like that. Just something or like C-SPAN. Let's watch an hour of C-SPAN and
my gosh,
see what's going on in Washington. Well, let's talk about the episode itself. One of the things that I really like about DS9 is one of the things that makes it unique in Trek TV. You know, the idea that it's set on a nominally non-Starfleet station, and the focus for the entire series is at least partially on the history between the Cardassians and the Bajorans. And it's a neat idea. When you've got a Galaxy-class starship and your mission is to explore, I mean, you don't hang around long after you've saved a planet or told Groppler Zorn he's a dick. You know, you're off to the next system.
Groppler.
And the question I think that the makers of DS9 wanted to ask was, you know, what if we don't leave? What if we hung around and we saw how a complicated situation worked itself out? And,
Right.
you know, what role, if any, the Federation can have in that? And that makes it so different from something like TNG, you know, which you guys are going through right now. Do you think that, does that appeal to you? Like the idea of a show where we're not going to fly away, we're going to hang around and see these people week in, week out?
Yeah, well, and it seems like it gives them the opportunity to have, I mean, they can still have other characters and species like coming in and out.
Yeah.
So it's not so different in the sense that even though they're on the ship and they're traveling around, we mostly see them on the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not actually that different, but it sets it up in a way that they can have some like different storylines than we would normally see.
They come to us instead of, you know, we go to them.
Oh,
Right.
totally. Especially because it's in like such a volatile spot in the galaxy, you know. So like there's
Right.
With a long history.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like on paper, I think if you told me like a 10-word like summary of what the series is, I'd be like, oh, that I don't know about that. I like the, you know, the exploration of Star Trek and stuff. But
Yeah.
it's actually like one of my favorite series of all the Star Trek series. So
Yeah, you get weirdly I mean, it's not weird, I guess, because it's really well done, but you get really invested in seeing those people again and again. And something else that I just noticed was that TNG has a million of those episodes where, oh, the holodeck's broke and we're stuck inside,
Right.
you know, or like somebody wants to get out of it. And they do a couple of those in DS9, but I think just the idea that having a holodeck because you can't interact with other people is, you know, why it's on TNG. And on DS9, the holodecks or the holosuites are just for baseball and sex, basically, because they're just
Sure.
because there are actual other people and races and things that you have to deal with that are coming in and out.
I also was thinking, like in TNG, you have a lot of fun side characters. None that we've gotten to really, but you know, you have like Barclay and you know some of that. But like most of them, you know, they crop up once in a while, and you get a fun little episode about them. But like in Deep Space Nine, I think because it is so you can focus on these granular things. Like they have so many like side characters who have like deep storylines to them. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I love Guinan, but like they took Guinan and turned her into Quark, and he became like one of the pillars of the show, and like spun off like the whole Ferengi thing.
Right.
Speaking of side characters, the Cardassians and the Bajorans obviously got their start on TNG, and they were spun off into DS9. With what you guys know about TNG and what's coming up, are there any other races you think might be interesting enough to get their own show?
Oh. Well, we haven't seen many like mainstays yet. We've just seen,
Yeah, no, like not a lot of recurring
but
races.
I really liked. We watched Home Soil, which I said was a hidden gem. I don't know if you could really do a whole episode about those little light bulb soil aliens, but
Yeah, maybe.
I would like to see the episode where they do return in 3 centuries to talk to those guys.
And see what's happening with them.
Oh, because they do say like we'll see you in the future.
See you later. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I always thought that I don't love the pilot, Encounter at Farpoint, but I always thought that
No.
like Farpoint could be its own kind of DS9 show. Like once they figure everything out, and like let's say they make a deal with the aliens where it's like, well, we'll just give you energy, but you just keep being like a cool station, and then you've got this station on a planet that's in the middle of nowhere. You fire Groppler Zorn, do that first thing, and then
he's not the main character.
Copy.
his son has to take over for him and fix all of his
Groppler Zorn
problems.
the second.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Groppler too. Yeah, and then you know it'd be kind. But I guess that's just DS9. And then hear me out. This is a crazy idea, but
Okay.
with Black Panther having been a huge movie last year, maybe with a lot of tinkering, the Ligonians from Code of Honor could have been a thing.
Oh, if actually I think we talked about that a little bit, where it's like you see such a difference in like maybe it's who's writing the character, you know?
Yeah, right.
I think it's definitely who's writing the character.
Because you could totally make like an awesome like Afro-futurist TV show that has like in Black Panther, you had people of color designing the wardrobe and the culture and stuff. But yeah, I don't know if I think I would reboot new culture, not like get away from the Ligonians though. But I like the idea of that though. For sure.
Turning it into something positive, because it's a really bad episode.
Oh, yeah.
So I could see, like, taking that and, like, maybe they could do something better with it.
Yeah. I mean, to put black creators in charge, you know, in the first place. But, like...
Oh, yeah.
Because as a... We don't really know a lot about them, I guess, but we know two things. One, they have, like, really high technology, like, as high as, if not higher than the Federation. And then also, they've got this weird... crazy like patriarchal society, but now that like Urena is basically in charge, she could drain the swamp on Ligon 2, and then we could get into that cool Afrofuturism that you were pointing out.
So is this much like kind of how like the Battle of Wolf is like the beginning point of Deep Space Nine, where it's like this sets things into motion for the main character of the show?
That's the launching point, yeah.
So Code of Honor is the launching point. Oh man, you take it from the worst thing to this show. Oh.
Yeah. I gotta cut this out. This is a great idea. I'm gonna pitch this.
Yeah.
Nobody will ever hear this.
I won't tell anybody.
Yeah, don't tell anybody. You know, even on TNG, Picard and company aren't always exploring. Sometimes they're just hanging out, using the holodeck. And a lot of them are musicians, too, I guess. I mean, Data plays the violin, Picard plays the flute, Riker plays the trombone. Maybe they let Crusher join in on the vibroslap. I don't know.
His trombone, which he affectionately calls his bone.
His bone. Oh, jeez, I know. So cool. And Picard likes to
putting together.
Yeah, put a band together. Picard likes to LARP as Dixon Hill, and as you pointed out, like that's probably as close to something like film noir as TNG usually gets. Like I know you guys are early on in the show still, but I was trying to cast forward into later seasons and think if they ever did like a real hard-boiled kind of thing, and I couldn't think of one. They do a mystery episode, I think in season 3, called A Matter of Perspective, where Riker is like accused of like killing he's having an affair supposedly with a woman and he kills her husband.
Okay.
And then it's kind of a Rashomon thing. Like they use the holodeck to like recreate everybody's testimonies of what happened. And they're trying to figure out this mystery. But otherwise, yeah, I think they were making a conscious effort to sort of stay away from traditional storytelling.
TNG was?
Yeah, at least when it comes to that, I mean, unless there's something that's totally slipping my mind that people are screaming at their iPods, I can't really think of anything.
Well, there are a lot of episodes I think we've encountered so far where we felt like, yeah, this could have been fine as it was, but then it felt like they had to throw in like a sci-fi element, which can be cool, but sometimes it felt like a little tacked on. Like maybe just let this be about whatever it was about, you know?
That's a great point. And the sci-fi elements, other than them just being on a space station, you know, in space, are really low in this episode. Like you could have done this, you could have changed all the space things to Earth things, and this could have been just something like set right after World War II or something like that.
Yeah.
In Berlin.
Yeah, totally.
Which I think really makes it work. There's more than a few noirish touches just besides the setting and the detective. Like we've mentioned, there's the first-person narration. You know, a lot of noirs were set around World War II or sort of feature the effects of World War II. And the Cardassian Occupation stands in for that. And something else that I thought was funny is that when Odo is questioning Palra, he goes to leave, and he comes back and he's like, oh, just one more thing, which is like Columbo's signature move, of course.
Oh.
Yeah, he would always, he'd always ask a bunch of innocuous questions, and he's like, one more thing. And then he asked, like, this is the question that's going to get you.
Oh, that's like such a trope now, too. Yeah.
Yeah. And Peter Allen Fields had written for Columbo in the 70s, so I think he's kind of doing a little wink there.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And there's a scene near the beginning where, after Quark is shot, when Odo is questioning Rom, and he and Cisco like immediately slip into like this good cop bad cop routine.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I love the Rom part of this episode.
Yeah. He's so great. I mean, this is one of the first episodes where we really see him take off as a character. And Max Grodenchik as Rom, he's one of my favorite characters on the show. He does such great work. And we learn that Rom is technically proficient, which we didn't really know before. And we start to establish that great comedic back and forth that we'll get throughout the series between him and Quark. And he also works great with Odo. Like in that scene, like Odo's bracing him, and he's like, "Oh, you killed your brother for the bar. You're not as stupid as you look." He's like, "No, I am. I'm really stupid."
What were you telling me before we recorded about how you felt about the beginning with Rom and Quark?
Oh, yeah. Well, so that was my first exposure at all to this series.
Scene.
And I was like, what am I watching? What is this going to be about? And then it got much better from there. And I was able to appreciate it like once the episode concluded. But I was a little worried that was going to be the whole episode.
Can you imagine if the series was centered around that dynamic?
Quark and Rom.
I'd be into it.
Mary, what's your impressions, just having seen this episode, of the Ferengi? I mean, you've seen them in The Last Outpost, I think, but they've changed a lot since TNG.
They definitely have like a lot more depth to them in this series. And like, I do like the sort of, they're bad, but they're not really bad. They're like too goofy to really take them like seriously as bad guys. So I like that element. I think that's good to kind of like have around. And it seems like that's who that's the go-to if there's like something nefarious going on. That's kind of your like intro into it, because they're not so bad that they'll be able to really deceive you, but they kind of know what's going on in that world. So I kind of like how they're being used here.
Yeah, I feel like they get profiled racially in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
Because it's, they have this whole society, of course, that's based around profit and getting it however you can. But it's like whenever something goes wrong, Odo's first thing is like, wow, it must be one of those Ferengi. Like, they're always sneaking around. It's like, whoa, dude, easy.
There's like a good example of how I like how they treat them when in one of the flashbacks he goes to Quark, and like Quark like hints that there might have been some weird like sexual favor going on.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, no, Quark is bad, but I was kind of like, not Quark. And then he was like, no, I mean, I didn't actually do that. I'm like, okay, like I think I almost like profiled Quark a little bit there. I was like, he's not
that bad, right?
he just likes money and stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's like Chris Farley. He's like, we got it on. It's like, no, we didn't. Yeah. And Odo's like, is that a sex thing? I don't really get what that is. That's one problem that we have with Quark. He can be, and he's supposed to be written as somewhat lecherous, and I'm fine. Like, I like it when Trek acknowledges that sex is a thing, and I'm fine with the horny barometer being high.
Yes.
But he's often unrepentantly gross. Like, he would get Me Too'd out of there pretty fast today.
Yeah.
Later on, they actually suggest that it's in the contract of his workers that they have to be open sexually to the boss.
Oh,
and they kind of play it like nobody really, like, he doesn't actually do it, and most of the girls are like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Well, it's just a contract." But yeah, I don't think that you would get something like that today.
No, I take it back. It's like you couldn't have a character like that who's like, and then it's like, but they're also
who's
likable.
also lovable. Yeah.
The lovable possible rapist, not great.
Yeah.
No.
Hard to pull off, even for Trek. Having a shadowy assassin or a heavy is another noir thing. And of course, in this episode, we get the guy whose name I've already forgot because.
Oh yeah.
His face also forgot it.
Yeah, yeah. He's got that slick backed hair, that you'd see on a thug. He must be getting paid pretty good to murder people in broad daylight. But my question is, like, he was working for Palra before she even starts getting money. Like, her lights are turned off. Like, the power companies cut her off at the beginning. So was he just working on spec in the beginning? Or were they like a couple, or was she like, giving him favors for his help? That's kind of a noirish trope.
Yeah, it's really not clear. There's like a little bit of fuzziness in the kind of origin of, I mean, maybe he knows the money is coming.
Yeah, maybe she was like, let's make a deal. I actually liked his presence because it was like a red herring, like was mentioned before, because when I saw him, I was like, oh, that's her husband and he's not dead.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was like making her do whatever, because she seemed like a little bit conflicted. So I thought maybe he was the brains behind the operation.
So this threw us all over the place.
It was a good red herring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever they reach the end of a scene with her, she's always, acting sort of vampy or self-satisfied. And then somebody leaves and she's like, like she does seem like she's kind of freaked out. So I can see how you would think that. Did you guys guess? The mystery? Did you know who really did it by the end?
No, not really.
No.
And I actually like that when it came, it wasn't in, it was kind of non-traditional. It wasn't like in a very aha way. It was like somber almost. It was like Odo figured it out and they didn't have to have a big scene where he made a big stink of it. It was sad.
There wasn't a key piece of evidence. He just kind of put it together that's what had happened.
Yeah,
that would be the drawing room show where he gathers everybody together, in a holosuite or something. And one of you was the murderer. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not guess it. I didn't get it. No.
Yeah, and it's a surprise too that they make it, one of our heroes. There's a lot of moral grayness and ambiguity even within our characters in this show that we'll get to later on. But I don't think anybody could have guessed that it would be one of the people that we're following here. And as far as that goes, Kira's I know she's got kind of a checkered past, but she knew the entire time what was going on. When the second they found the list, she knew what the list was. Yeah. And so she's basically, I guess, just lying the entire show.
Yeah. This was something. So what I like about Deep Space Nine is it really makes you think about morality, like all of Star Trek does. But I watched his ep for this podcast 2 weeks ago, and I've been thinking about it since, because like you said, Kira was lying, but I was also thinking, if you are making it an analogous to post World War II, in this reality, I don't know if I would feel bad about lying, because it was we were occupied by this force that was putting us in concentration camps and stuff. So I was almost no, Kira, stick up for yourself a little bit. I wouldn't lie all you want about this. You did what you had to do.
Yeah, we all did bad stuff in those days. Yeah. It's a great misdirect, too, to have Palra be all slinkied up, in the beginning and seem like she's going to be the femme fatale of the episode. But it's really Kira that's the femme fatale here. She's got this innocent act that she plays in the past. And it's kind of a gruff version of it. It's don't touch me, I'll break your hand type thing.
Yeah.
But then she's playing the sort of innocent waif later on. And revealing something fake to Odo that she did this bombing, to hide, what she actually did. But yeah, it's there's a lot of episodes that come later that deal with her past, as a terrorist, basically, with the Shakar cell and all the things that she had to do and how complicated it is morally for her. But this is a really good example of that.
Yeah, it showed her spy abilities, essentially. She can get in there, she can lie, and it's something she still has in her,
Yeah, she's good at what she does. Back to the assassin real quick. I like the fact that we've established, in TNG, I think, or in some parts of Star Trek, they established that you can't shoot a gun on a ship without the ship knowing. And so I guess that makes sense why he is just stabbing people. He uses the old knife in the flowers trick on that guy.
Classic.
Sick bay. Yeah, classic trick. And, of course, then he uses the old smother a guy with a pillow trick on Quark. Mm-hmm. And then Rom saves the day with the scream bloody murder trick. So
I
just thought it was interesting.
My favorite scene in the whole episode, actually.
Yeah, and the staging is so great, especially, him continuing to scream. And then we get the cut to Quark smiling when he realizes that he's, had the last laugh. But we're happy that Quark's alive at the end of that scene. But I guess the guy in the purple jumpsuit just bleeds out. Like, we never see anybody rush to, like, help him. Like, the guy is just stabbed and,
Just
oh, well,
had to
he's
take
gone.
one for the team, I guess.
Yep.
He's just
That's what you got to do.
He's a total scrub. What a jobber.
He woke up that morning, God, I love my job. I can't remember my name, but my job is great. And I love my purple jumpsuit.
Yeah, I didn't even, yeah, like that character was out of my mind as soon as he was down.
He falls out of frame and he's gone.
He died doing what he loved.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple other noir tropes in this episode. You know, we've got Dukat as the morally gray villain. I mean, he's not a nice guy at all, but it's interesting that he is trying to solve the murder without the involvement of the authorities, because apparently the Cardassians' way of dealing with stuff is just to kill 10 random people. And the added fact is that he's trying to preserve his network of Bajoran traitors, you know, but details.
Yeah. I just love that actor and like his performance. So like,
yes.
Yeah, that was my main takeaway from this. His character is one of my favorites in the show, even though he's just like so terrible for the most of it.
He starts off as a kind of ambiguous character. You know, the Cardassians are this sort of morally flexible but like administrative species, and so the first couple seasons he just kind of hangs around, and he actually kind of becomes a somewhat anti-hero good guy in the middle of the show. Just, you know, mild spoilers. And then, of course, he becomes just the ultimate bad guy, like, by the end. So I just want to know, like, as somebody who hasn't seen the show much, Mary, like, what was your impression of Dukat? What did you think of him?
He was kind of a good gray area character. Like, I could, like, the way that you're describing it, I could totally see him, like, helping out in one situation, but then going really dark in another. It seems like whatever benefits him, but he's also, like, smart enough to... He's not too harsh with people to where he can't get, like, Odo to help him.
Yeah.
So, like, he's really, like, walking that line between doing what he needs to do to, like, accomplish, like, his goals, but not being, like, so evil that, you know, he's, like, irredeemable, at least at this point.
Yeah, that's a really great read on him, because I think if I had to describe him, it would be, in one word, it would be extremely narcissistic, which is 2 words. But he balances that with a patriotism. You know, he really cares about, that's something else that plays through the Cardassians, is that they really care about supporting Cardassia and being a part or a cog in the machine of Cardassia. And that erodes over the course of DS9 as he feels kind of more and more betrayed, or as doing his duties keeps him from getting what he wants, and then he just decides that he wants what he wants. And so we see not necessarily a good man, but a man with principles, you know, break down to become just an animal, basically, by the end.
I like what you said about his, like, arc over the show, like, the idea of that, because I think Star Trek is typically more, like, we want to, like, forgive people who've done bad things. Like, we were talking with Admiral Jameson, was it, in that one episode, where we kind of were both on the page of like, no, screw this guy. Like,
too short a season.
Yeah. We're like, yeah, this guy's like a war criminal. Like, we hate him.
And like, his old man makeup is terrible.
And that didn't help his case either. But, you know, so Star Trek errs on the side of like redemption and forgiveness typically. But I like that for Dukat, it was like, you know, maybe he's not so bad. But then by the end, like you said, he's like terrible.
This guy's lost.
Yeah.
He's a mad dog. Yeah, he needs to be put down.
Like, Deep Space Nine in general just reminds me, it's like, for me, it's less utopian, maybe, but it's more of, like, a real look at how people are, I guess, you know? Like, that happens, too, you know, non-redemption, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes people don't, come around. Yeah, exactly. There's another kind of noir aspect of this, in that the hero is, you know, thinks he's in control, but he's kind of being played for a patsy. You know, Dukat gasses Odo up that, you know, he's the best man for this job, but he's really only bringing him in, I'm assuming, because he assumes that he'll fail, which he kind of does when you think about it. Like, he is hired to find the killer, he doesn't, and then he gets the constable job anyway, which is like, I can't think of a specific example right now, but there's like, the plot where the hero finds out the truth. Actually, I do have one. If you guys know the comic or the movie Watchmen.
Okay, a little bit.
the heroes in it, and if people don't know it, I don't want to spoil it, but I'll be vague. The heroes sort of find out this horrible thing, but they find out that like the reality of if they let this secret out, it'll be even worse. And so they have to basically just internalize it and just go, we're never going to tell anybody, and we'll all get a benefit from this, and we'll hate the benefit, and we'll hate ourselves for taking it, but that's what we have to do. And in this, it's like he gets the job as the constable, as a cop, kind of as a reward, I think, like from Dukat, like, good job, you did what I wanted, you didn't find the killer, that's okay, why don't you stick around, because you seem like somebody that I can manipulate, or
yeah,
who might fail to find the next person that I don't want you to find.
Yeah, it seems like that's actually what had me thinking for like 2 weeks, is like how like redemptive is Odo, because him, if we are making a World War II reference sometimes with these guys, it's like isn't Odo being like a mediator between the Bajorans and the Cardassians, like kind of like being the nicest concentration camp guard in a way?
Sure. He's a Vichy changeling.
But then at the same time I was thinking, well, it would be very easy for Dukat to be like, look, you got to do what I say or I'm going to kill 10 Bajorans,
Right.
There's that threat hanging over it for sure.
Yeah, so I could see how it's like, well, I mean, I don't know what else to do. Like, he's almost like, it's not just a case of, when people say the kind of trope of, oh, they were just doing their job. It's more of like, no, I'm being forced to do this, or more innocent people will die. And so I was kind of wrestling with that a little bit.
But then he didn't end up solving it, and they didn't kill 10 Bajorans, right?
Yeah, well, I don't think by that point Dukat didn't care. I would assume
that's another fuzzy area. But yeah, I'm assuming there wasn't some huge tragedy after that.
Yeah, well,
there's actually.
It's
I don't want
to.
Yeah, I don't want to wreck anything for you guys, but there is a episode later on that we get another kind of flashback, and we find out that Odo, in his job as constable after this, I believe, does get into a situation where that kind of thing is on the line, like people possibly going to be executed if he can't find out what the thing is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious to revisit that because I don't remember the specifics, but
this constable job sounds terrible.
Yeah, like under constant threat of everyone dying.
Yeah, it's like he's like the sheriff of the roughest town in the West, and it's the life expectancy of that kind of sheriff isn't usually very long.
Yeah.
You
just put Velcro on the back of the badge and just give it to the next guy.
Luckily, he can shapeshift, so.
Yeah, right. Well, outside of his role as a constable or a detective, what are you guys' opinion on Odo as a character? Both having a little bit of knowledge and having not really a lot of knowledge at all.
Well, I really liked his salty personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's I know, it's supposed to be kind of funny, but I was like, man, he's pretty rude to Rom. It turned me off a bit. This is the first time I've been dipping back into Deep Space Nine in a couple years, and I was like, is Odo a jerk? I mean, he is, but is that likable? But no, I like the things we were just discussing about the moral ambiguity almost of him. I was questioning whether I should like him a lot more watching this now than I was 5 years ago when I went through, and it actually made me like it more, even though I potentially thought I like Odo less, I guess.
Yeah, well, and the fact that in all these kind of blended cultures, he's still an outsider.
Right.
And so that really, the way that shapes his perspective, or that he was insulted that he had to keep records because he's my memory is good enough, very much Data vibes of trying to understand all these other people and how they're interacting with each other but feeling separate from that. So I feel it gives a good perspective because obviously we don't I mean, sometimes there's humans, but we're not necessarily a part of any of the cultures that we're seeing. So it's a good stand-in for us.
Yeah, and also you mentioned Data, and Data I feel fills a spot that was similar to Spock, where it's the truly other person on the ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he's the continuation of that, but like I was saying, Data and Spock are like fan favorites in their shows because they're like fun and funny, whereas like Odo, I mean, he has funny jokes and stuff sometimes, but typically you're like, this guy's a little he's like kind of intense and mean, you know. So like,
yeah,
that's
he
a
really
spin.
he is. Yeah, and I think that his upbringing has a lot to do with that. The fact that it was basically a science experiment, you know, as he was growing up, and he was put on display, and there must have been a lot of feeling of just chaos for him personally. And I think that really contributed to his sense of justice. Like, he has finally broken free, and in his psychology, he's going to show them. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's going to keep the order. He's going to make sure that there's justice. And of course, justice, absolute justice, is never just justice. And so we see often on the show about how he has to learn to decide when it's the right time to really bring the full force of the law in, or when to kind of let something slide.
Yeah, that was another thing I like really was thinking about in that time, was like, even if I don't know actually how much like justice he was looking to serve, like when he was being constable for the Cardassians, and maybe he was more forced into it, because at the same time too, it's like, we know what happens when he says who he thinks is guilty. They get executed. So he is like, they don't get a real trial, we see. So he is like judge and jury, and then the Cardassians are executioners. So like, is that real justice? Is it like, oh, I think I found, if he did find someone who he believes did it, like, would they really get a fair shake anyway? Is that justice?
And it's the truth as he perceives it. So even though he's not going to turn like Kira in, he's making that decision.
Right.
And kind of like, well, who is he to decide that?
Yeah. And is he compromised because of his friendship with Kira? Like, should he, you know, a lot of, like, in a post-war situation, like Gooey mentioned, like, a lot of crimes are just looked at as, well, they were Cardassians, like, you know, or they were collaborators. Mm-hmm. Who cares? But is he compromising himself by basically, once again, not actually solving the mystery? Like, he doesn't really tell anybody about Kira's thing. So, and as far as like him being judge, jury, and executioner, keep watching DS9. They will definitely deal with that kind of stuff later on in the series. You mentioned the Spock character, if you will, and I just sort of thought of something, that character always does seem to come from a bad childhood, you know, or an ambiguous background. Like, Data is literally just woke up on a rock, and he's trying to remember his past and connect with his father. And Spock came from a weird, and as the Trek universe goes on, a more complicated sort of situation as a child. But he was definitely antagonized for being, you know, a half-breed, being half human and half Vulcan.
Yeah.
And even going forward to Seven of Nine, you've got a character who, at a very young age, you know, was ripped away from her parents and was assimilated and became a monster, basically, and she's trying to find her way back from that. So that's a running archetype on the show. It's
especially, with Data, it's like, and Odo too. It's like when they have a mysterious background, and then when it's like you discover it, it's like, oh, it's not even like something like kind of good, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I came from a total mess.
Yeah.
That sucks to find out.
I have to give credit to Rene Auberjonois, because he is really great in this episode as Odo, as he is throughout the entire series.
Yeah.
And this is one of the first episodes, at least for me, where I really started to get into him as a character and not just see him as the guy who's harumping around the station and he's always trying to catch Quark.
Yeah, it would make sense, like, that this would be, you know, season 2, season 3, where, like, a lot of characters and shows start to click. This seems like maybe this is his moment.
It's just a really great episode. It's really well layered, and the use of flashbacks is really great because it really gives you like two mysteries for your buck. Like, it's a double kind of mystery going on, and they add a lot of depth and context to the present scenes when we get back to them. There's something that I found kind of funny. I think this is a good touch, but again, maybe a little on the nose. But they do a lot of like match cuts between the flashback scenes and the real scenes to show you the difference that 5 years has taken on the station. And there's one part where you see two little kids like running around and playing in the halls. And then we flash back, and we see two other kids literally behind bars, like two sad kids, just going like...
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Bleak.
That is very on the nose, yeah. I the one that stuck out to me was, like, the one that was done with, like, laughter.
Yeah, where Quark's laughing, yeah.
Quark's laughing, Dukat's laughing, and then everyone's...
it reminds me of some other laughter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, these are all very corny.
He's like, I told you my memory's really good.
I remember every time somebody laughed. And here they all are.
Yeah, Odo, actually, his speaking of his memory and also, like, is this not appropriate for a Starfleet log? Like, those things about him, like, make me, like, not like him, but then I would think about, like, well, that's just how he is, and, like, it's not really his fault. It also makes me think of, like, sometimes where Data is, like, bragging, and then people call him out for it, and then he's like, well, I didn't think I was bragging, and it's like, just Data, just move on. But right. It's like, it's not his fault, but
scan the room, with your sensors.
Yeah.
It just feels like, man, it would be a chore to be your friend, you know?
There's also this thing with, like, really depraved villains and, like, really noble heroes, in that they, like, the villains have a weird fascination with that hero sometimes. Like, they're fascinated with trying to, like, to see if they can break, like, these morally upright heroes. And I think that it's one of the reasons that Dukat keeps him around. You know, we hear in other episodes about how they would play chess or something, or they would have these conversations. And Dukat's always like, we had such great conversations. And Odo's like, no, we didn't. Like, you would just talk at me, and I'd be like, whatever. And so... yeah, he's just like, there's something seductive about good for evil sometimes.
Yeah, it makes me think of, like, the meme almost of that in Austin Powers that they reference, where they're like, why don't you just kill him, you know?
Well, I've got the show art for this show. Dukat's face on Dr. Evil going, lasers, or something like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we need the Austin Powers type send-up of Deep Space Nine.
I got a phaser in my quarters. I'll come back. Zap, they're dead.
It's recast with all the same actors. Get Seth Green in there.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, as we wrap up here, do you guys have any last thoughts about this episode?
Well, what did you think about the end of the episode, Gooey?
Well, like I said, I sort of said it already, but, like, I was pretty on board, and, like, even Kira, like, she was like, you know, I had reason not to tell you. Like, I was, like, confused, or, like, took a little bit issue with Odo being like, well, why didn't you tell me? But when I think back to that moment she was in the past, like, if she did tell him then, of course, you know, do his instincts of, like, justice kick in and be like, well, she did the crime, so I'm going to get her executed. Even afterwards, it's like, well, I don't know if that's something that I would ever trust with you. And it made me want to rewatch the show, because I was like, do they grow this friendship and this trust to this point? Like, is it earned? You know, it's ambiguous, and I like that, but it made me think, like, would she be so trusting of him even at this point? They kind of put, to me, a little bit of too much blame on her when I was like, well, I don't know if I would have done that either. Right,
and he's like, well, and you could have told me any time after that, but it's kind of a weird thing to just bring up randomly.
Sure,
like, hey, do you remember that murder investigation you never solved? That was me.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but like I said, I thought about it, and I liked where they came to in the end. I was just, like, thrown off a bit at first. Like, that was maybe my personal feelings about it. I don't think, like, it was meant to have, like, implications either way. It's supposed to be ambiguous, but I did think the show itself leaned a little bit
towards sympathizing with Odo.
Yeah. Kind of like Kira. Actually with Admiral Jameson, like, I didn't mind that they told that story. It was more of, like, the framing of the show itself was, like, moralizing towards him a little bit more than I would tend to lean to. Just
pushing you to sympathize in a way that you resist, because you're like, I don't think I do sympathize with this character or this person in this situation.
Yeah. Like, you could tell almost the exact same story, I think, not even change. It's just, like, the way the show is made, you know? It's just, like...
Right.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, it's a little abrupt, the ending, because it's, like, really... after all the mystery and everything, the real meat of like the character or the characters is what's their relationship going to be now. You know, so if this was like a movie or like a book or something, that would be the second act thing. Who has a crinkly nose and a flat top and killed that guy 5 years ago? This girl.
I do like that it was so abrupt, though, because we've talked a lot recently in our TNG eps, except for a couple. It's like they always end in such a like traditional way, and then they always got to throw a joke in there, so you know it's the end.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And they go
No
engage.
trouble at all. Yeah.
I like that this one and Deep Space Nine does this a lot, where it's like, yeah, no, I mean, there's just no clear answer for this, and we're not even going to try to make you feel better about it, and like it left me doing what I think it intended, where I've been like thinking about it for weeks, trying to like put it together how I feel.
Yeah, I think on TNG, a lot of times that's the effect of just, well, you know, we're done. We fixed the planet. You know, we kicked Grappler Zorn in the ass, so we got to get out of here. And for this, you know, what I was saying about the novel analogy is that just leave it, because the whole show's a novel. So this is just a development, and then we will see how that plays out, you know, over succeeding episodes. And as far as the Jameson thing goes, another thing that I don't like about Jameson is he comes... It's a weird thing to do so early in a show to bring this guy on, and it becomes like the Jameson show for like the entire episode. Like the whole thing revolves around him.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying to spin off a show about Jameson. Because suddenly, and he's not even that. It's not like a lot of times Trek will bring in like a really famous guest star, and then they'll bring Sarek on, like Mark Lenard as Sarek, and you go, okay, sure, let's watch a whole episode about Sarek. But suddenly it's like guy in old face makeup, and the whole thing's about him, and it's super important that he, you know, does this treaty or whatever it is.
You know what? Maybe that's thematic though, because that's what was happening in the episode too. He was coming in and taking over.
Yeah.
They got to the core of our emotions
by pissing us off. Yeah. Well, let's talk. My space dad can beat up your various space dads. Who are your favorite captains and why? Mary?
Oh, well, I mean, my most familiar with is Jean-Luc Picard, so he's my fave.
Sure. Do you have a opinion about Sisko for the little that you see him?
He seems cool. I'm sure at some point I'll get to Deep Space Nine, and I was looking forward to seeing him. Just his whole kind of serious vibe. I was into that.
We got to do like some spin-offs or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, Sisko he's like maybe my favorite, but like Picard, it's like maybe it's like a 1A 1B thing for me.
Okay. He doesn't have a band named after him though.
That's true. Well, he just doesn't have as catchy of. There is the artist Sisko who did the thong song, so maybe that's maybe more. He is maybe more noteworthy than any band I've ever done. You know, I didn't write the thong song.
We're finally making that connection.
Oh man.
But I the reason I would say 1A and 1B is because like in a lot of ways Sisko is like almost like an anti-Picard. Mm-hmm. Like we see it in like the first episode of the series. We should totally watch that sometimes, where it's like they have like clashing viewpoints, and I think that's I don't know, that's something that's like interesting going into the show. Like I feel like that and the premise of the show would maybe turn people off initially. Like, who's this guy? And they're only on the space station? Like, I don't know.
He's got a kid, and yeah.
Yeah, he goes morally gray too, more so than they ever would do with Picard. Mm-hmm. Not saying that makes it better or worse. It's just different, and I like that.
That's cool. I've spent this whole time trying to think of a Sisko thing. He's got bumps like a wharf or something, but I didn't come up with anything. So now that we've reached the end of the show, you'll receive a commission and the rank of ensign. What departments on the ship do you both work in?
Oh, interesting. Is there a music department? Do we want to go there? Or...
I think there's going to have to be.
Yeah, we could start the. Are we on a ship? Right.
Yeah.
We could be like start
or a station.
Ship or station band. I mean, I don't want to speak for both of us, so.
No,
yeah, Mary, what about you?
I think that's where I would want to be too. This is hard to think about.
We could be like. Do they have like a radio station?
Well, given my actual work history, I'd probably end up doing some kind of administrative job. realistically.
I think I've been traditionally a chef, or not a chef, a cook. So like that position doesn't really
But they
exist.
don't need you. You could be a bartender.
Oh yeah, I could be a bar back for Guinan or something.
Yeah.
You started off with creating a band or being in music, and you guys have downgraded yourselves to like desk clerk and bar back. So
Well,
keep dreaming.
We're being realistic here.
Yeah, we got too real.
We've actually talked about, I think we talked about this on the show, but like chefs must exist somewhere. It's just more a feature of there's like a Chef Boyardee, right? And so he makes like whatever the pasta recipe is, and then it gets mass produced into cans and stuff. So somebody must make the perfect, beef Wellington, but then it gets scanned into the computer and it just comes out of the replicator like that.
I think there's a Star Trek like spin-off cooking show that could be made.
Oh, well, it's
Cooking
got to
with
be
Felix.
a cooking competition, though.
Oh yeah, like Chopped, but
Yeah.
Okay, that would be awesome.
Pack up your replicator. You're going home. Yeah. And as far as the admin side, hopefully, the advanced computers and like near AI that they have would take care of a lot of administrative tasks. But then again, the computer was supposed to create a paperless office. So I'm just imagining like all the decks we don't see are just full of people sitting at a desk punching, brightly colored buttons all day long.
Yep, that'd be me.
What a wonderful, wonderful world.
Ambitious.
Well, Ensigns heelmary and Gooey Fame, thanks for joining me to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. If people want to continue the conversation, and they can, at @EISTpod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
Yes, our existence is Futile Pod on Instagram. You can also follow me at heelmary on Instagram.
And then I got Twitter down. It's EIF Pod, at EIF Pod, and you can find me at Gooey Fame on Twitter. We got Facebook stuff too, but we're not. Who cares about Facebook anymore?
Do you guys want to plug your bands at all?
Oh sure.
Just We Are Bringers. So Facebook, Bandcamp, We Are Bringers.
Annabelle. It's search. Actually, there's a couple of Annabelle bands, but I can't remember. It might be Annabelle or Annabelle, Ohio, something like that. But Google it. I guess. I'm sorry. I don't know our tags.
We're actually, Bringers is finishing up an album right now, so we'll likely be doing a spring or summer tour, but nothing official yet.
That's great, and people can find that on your Bandcamp, right?
Yeah, Bandcamp or Facebook. We'll probably post any kind of tour information will be on Facebook. So yeah, just We Are Bringers on Facebook.
I have some other like musical and podcast things that are still in the works, but if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see them.
And people should definitely check out the Pro Wrestling Required Viewing podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again for joining me.
Thanks
for having us.
This is fun.
We're signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed.